Chapter 4 of Agriculture for Beginners. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Marianne Spiegel. Agriculture for Beginners by Charles William Burkett. Chapter 4. How to Raise a Fruit Tree. Let each pupil grow an apple tree this year and attempt to make it the best in the neighborhood. In your attempt, suppose you try the following plan. In the fall, take the seed of an apple, a crab apple is good, and keep it in a cool place during the winter. The simplest way to do this is to bury it in damp sand. In the spring, plant it in a rich, loose soil. Great care must be taken of the young shoot as soon as it appears above the ground. You want to make it grow as tall and as straight as possible during this first year of its life. Hence you should give it rich soil and protect it from farm animals. Before the ground freezes in the fall, take up the young tree with the soil that was around it and keep it all winter in a cool, damp place. Now when spring comes, it will not do to set out the carefully tended tree, for an apple tree from seed will not be a tree like its parent, but will tend to resemble a more distant ancestor. The distant ancestor that the young apple tree is most likely to take after is the wild apple, which is small, sour, and otherwise far inferior to the fruit we wish to grow. It makes little difference, therefore, what kind of apple seed we plant, since in any event we cannot be sure that the tree grown from it will bear fruit worth having unless we force it to do so. Section 22. Grafting. By a process known as grafting, you can force your tree to produce whatever variety of apple you desire. Many people raise fruit trees directly from seed without grafting. Thus, they often produce really worthless trees. By grafting, they would make sure not only of having good trees rather than poor ones, but also of having the particular kind of fruit they wish. Hence, you must now graft your tree. First, you must decide what variety of apple you wish to grow on the tree. The Magnum bonum is a great favorite as a fall apple. The Winsop is a good winter apple, while the red astrachan is a profitable early apple, especially in the lowland of the coast region. The Northern Spy, Aesop, and Spitzenberg are also admirable kinds. Possibly some other apple that you know may suit your taste and needs better than any of these varieties. If you have decided to raise an Aesop or Magnum bonum or Winsop, you must now cut a twig from the tree of your choice and graft it upon the little tree that you have raised. Choose a twig that is about the thickness of the young tree at the point where you wish to graft. Be careful to take the shoot from a vigorous, healthy part of the tree. There are many ways in which you may join the chosen shoot or twig upon the young tree, but perhaps the best one for you to use is known as tongue grafting. This is illustrated in Figure 64. The upper part, B, which is the shoot or twig that you cut from the tree, is known as the scion. The lower part, A, which is the original tree, is called the stalk. Cut the scion and stalk as shown in Figure 64. Join the cut end of the scion to the cut end of the stalk. When you join them, notice that under the bark of each there is a thin layer of soft, juicy tissue. This is called the cambium. To make a successful graft, the cambium in the scion must exactly join the cambium in the stalk. Be careful then to see that the cambium meets cambium. You now see why grafting can be more successfully done if you select a scion and stalk of nearly the same size. After fitting the parts closely together, bind them with cotton yarn, see Figure 65, that has been coated with grafting wax. This wax is made of equal parts of tallow, beeswax, and linseed oil. Smear the wax thoroughly over the whole joint and make sure that the joint is completely airtight. The best time to make this graft is when scion and stalk are dormant, that is, when they are not in leaf. During the winter, say in February, is the best time to graft the tree. Set the grafted tree away again in damp sand until spring, then plant it in loose, rich soil. Since all parts growing above the graft will be of the same kind as the scion, while all branches below it will be like the stalk, it is well to graft low on the stalk or even upon the root itself. The slanting double line in Figure 66 shows the proper place to cut off for such grafting. If you like, you may sometimes make the interesting and valuable experiment of grafting scions from various kinds of apple trees on the branches of one stock. In this way you can secure a tree bearing a number of kinds of fruit. You may thus raise the bonum, red astrachan, winsop, and as many other varieties of apples as you wish upon one tree. For this experiment, however, you will find it better to resort to cleft grafting, which is illustrated in Fig. 68. Luther Burbank, the originator of the Burbank potato, in attempting to find a variety of apples suited to the climate of California, grafted more than 500 kinds of apple scions on one tree, so that he might watch them side by side and find out which kind was best suited to that state. Section 23. Budding. If instead of an apple tree you were raising a plum or peach tree, a form of propagation known as budding would be better than grafting. Occasionally budding is also employed for apples, pears, cherries, oranges, and lemons. Budding is done in the following manner. A single bud is cut from the scion, and then is inserted under the bark of a 1-year-old peach seedling, so that the cambium of the bud and stalk may grow together. Cut scions of the kind of fruit tree that you desire from a 1-year-old twig of the same variety. Wrap them in a clean, moist cloth until you are ready to use them. Just before using, cut the bud from the scion, as shown in Fig. 69. This bud is now ready to be inserted on the north side of the stalk, just 2 or 3 inches above the ground. The north side is selected to avoid the sun. Now, as shown at A in Fig. 70, make a cross and an up and down incision, or cut, on the stalk. Pull the bark back carefully as shown in B, insert the bud C as shown in D, then fold the bark back and wrap with yarn or raffia as shown in E. As soon as the bud and branches have united, remove the wrapping to prevent its cutting the bark and cut the tree back close to the bud, as in Fig. 71, so as to force nourishment into the inserted bud. Budding is done in the field without disturbing the tree as it stands in the ground. The best time to do budding is during the summer or fall months, when the bark is loose enough to allow the buds to be easily inserted. Trees may be budded or grafted on one another only when they are nearly related. Thus the apple, crabapple, hawthorn, and quince are all closely related enough to graft or bud on one another. The pear grows on some hawthorns, but not well on an apple. Some chestnuts will unite with some kinds of oaks. By using any of these methods, you can succeed in getting with certainty the kind of tree that you desire. Section 24. Planting and pruning. The apple tree that you grafted should be set out in the spring. Dig a hole 3 or 4 feet in diameter where you wish the tree to grow. Place the tree in the hole and be very careful to preserve all the fine roots. Spread the roots out fully, water them, and pack fine, rich soil firmly about them. Place stakes about the young tree to protect it from injury. If the spot selected is in a windy location, incline the tree slightly toward the prevailing wind. You must prune the tree as it grows. The object of pruning is to give the tree proper shape and to promote fruit bearing. If the bud at the end of the main shoot grows, you will have a tall, cone-shaped tree. If, however, the end of the young tree be cut or headed back to the line shown in Fig. 72, the buds below this point will be forced to grow and make a tree like that shown in Fig. 73. The proper height of heading for different fruit varies. For the apple tree, a height of 2 or 3 feet is best. Cutting an end bud of a shoot or branch always sends the nourishment and growth into the side buds. Trimming or pinching off the side buds throws the growth into the end bud. You can therefore cause your tree to take almost any shape you desire. The difference between the trees shown in Figures 73 and 74 is entirely the result of pruning. 74 illustrates in general a correctly shaped tree. It is evenly balanced, emits light freely, and yet has enough foliage to prevent sun scald. Figures 75 and 76 show the effect of wisely thinning the branches. The best time to prune is either in the winter or before the buds start in the spring. Winter pruning tends to favor wood production, while summer pruning lessens wood production and induces fruitage. Each particular kind of fruit requires special pruning. For example, the peach should be made to assume the shape illustrated in Fig. 77. This is done by successive trimmings, following the plan illustrated in Figures 71, 78, 79. You will gain several advantages from these trimmings. First, nourishment will be forced into the peach bud that you set on your stock. This will secure a vigorous growth of the scion. By a second trimming, take off the heel, Fig. 78H, close to the tree, and thus prevent decay at this point. 1 year after budding, you should reduce the tree to a whip, as in Fig. 79, by trimming at the dotted line in Fig. 78. This establishes the head of the tree, which in the case of the peach should be very low, about 16 inches from the ground, in order that low foliage may lessen the danger of sun scald to the main trunk. In pruning, never leave a stump such as shown in Fig. 78H. Such a stump, having no source of nourishment, will heal very slowly and with great danger of decay. If this heel is cleanly cut on the line CH, Fig. 78, the wound will heal rapidly and with little danger of decay. Leaving such a stump endangers the soundness of the whole tree. Fig. 78 shows the results of good and poor pruning on a large tree. When large limbs are removed, it is best to paint the cut surface. The paint will ward off fungus disease and thus keep the tree from rotting where it was cut. Pruning that leaves large limbs branching, as in Fig. 74A, is not to be recommended, since the limbs when loaded with fruit or when beaten by heavy winds are liable to break. Decay is apt to set in at the point of breakage. The entrance of decay fungi through some wound or through a tiny crevice at such a crotch is the beginning of the end of many a fruitful tree. Sometimes a tree will go too much to wood and too little to fruit. This often happens in rich soil and may be remedied by another kind of pruning known as root pruning. This consists in cutting off a few of the roots in order to limit the food supply of the plant. You ought to learn more about root pruning, however, before you attempt it. How is a peach tree made? First, the blossom appears. Then pollination and fertilization occur. The fruit ripens. The pit or seed is saved. In the spring of the next year, the seed is planted. The young tree, known as the stalk, comes up quickly. In August of that year, a bud of the variety which is wanted is inserted in the little stalk near the ground. 1 year later, in the spring, the stalk is cut off just above the bud. The bud throws out a shoot, which grows to a height of about 6 feet, and in the fall this little peach tree is sold as a 1-year-old tree. However, as is seen, the root is 2 years old. How is an apple tree made? The seeds are saved in the fall of 1 year and planted the following year. The seedlings of the apple do not grow so rapidly as those of the peach. At the end of the year they are taken up and sorted, and in the following spring they are planted. In July or August they are budded. In the spring of the next year the stalk is cut off above the bud, and the bud shoot grows 3 or 4 feet. 1 year later the shoot branches, and the top begins to form, and in the fall of the following year the tree may be sold as a 2-year-old, although most persons prefer to buy it a little later as a 3-year-old. In some parts of the country, particularly in the West, the little seedling is grafted in the second winter in a grafting room, and the young grafts are set in the nursery row in the spring to complete their growth. The planting of the orchard of the young peach and the young apple tree is done practically in the same way. After the hole for the tree has been dug, and after proper soil has been provided, the roots should be spread and soil carefully packed around them. Exercise. Do you know any trees in your neighborhood that bear both wild and budded or grafted fruit? What are the chief varieties of apples grown in your neighborhood? Grapes, currants, plums, cherries, figs. What is a good apple tree worth? Is there any land nearby that could support a tree and is not doing so now? Examine several orchards and see whether the trees have the proper shape. Do you see any evidence of poor pruning? Do you find any heels? Can you see any place where heels have resulted in rotten or hollow trees? How could you have prevented this? Has the removal of branches ever resulted in serious decay? How is this to be prevented? If your home is not well stocked with all the principal kinds of fruit, do you not want to propagate and attend to some of each kind? You will be surprised to find how quickly trees will bear and how soon you will be eating fruit from your own planting. Growing your own trees will make you feel proud of your skill. End of chapter 4.